welcome. I'm, a little challenged because it is right after lunch and you're all sleepy, but that's okay. We're going to work to overcome that. Somebody else had asked earlier about generating a culture of doc, and so this is a talk kind of addressing just that issue, generating a culture of doc, encouraging engineers to do the right thing, that is not a typo, in terms of documenting internal processes. What I'm going to talk about is really the ideal in many ways. I am here to inspire you. I am here to give you ideas of things that you can do. I totally get that not everybody is going to be able to do what I'm doing right now, but I want to tell you it's possible. So that's a lot of what this is all about. So who the heck am I? My name is Leah Cutter. My title is Knowledge Management Specialist. Ooh. I've been doing technical writing since 1985. Yes, I am old. I have a degree in computer science. I have a degree in English. I am a geek. I was up way too late last night playing Ingress. Anybody here familiar with Ingress? Woohoo! Yes. Google's MMORPG. Great fun. Anyway, Knowledge Management Specialist, huh? What is that? It is my job to generate framework for engineer-generated content. So I create how things look. I create the framework. I joke about how I tell engineers what it is they have to write, where it is they have to put it, and how it should look, which is kind of actually my job. So I do a lot. You'll notice that writer is no longer in my title. I just manage framework. I just manage other people's writing. I don't generate content anymore, which is actually kind of nice. I get to tell other people what to do. Engineer-generated content includes code comments, README files, specs, team sites, team wikis, email announcement, architecture diagrams, internal white papers, internal newsletters or blogs, and I promise this is the last slide that has this much text on it, so read it while you can. You'll notice that external customer-facing documentation is not anywhere on that list. I am only focused on internal documentation at this point. Internal doc? I mean, really? We all know the issues that you're having, a difficult enough time getting engineers to focus on external documentation. But I am here to tell you, brothers and sisters of the chorus, yes, it is possible to have that culture of doc, to get your engineers more excited about doc, and the way I am going to suggest that you do this is by primarily focusing on internal processes. Woohoo! So the culture of doc. Yes, engineer-generated content for the win. There is a way of doing this. And, a lot of you, as I said, I am living the dream. I am focused primarily on internal doc. I don't have anything to do with external doc. Your first question is, why? Why should my engineer help me write doc? Why should they help in any of this process? And particularly because, as it says, some writers think that this is all that an engineer can do. And we all have horror stories. We all have horror stories about the engineer spec that they handed to you that they thought would be perfect for the external doc, right? Or the time that I had a non-English speaker come through and try to correct all of my doc. Yes, yes. But honestly, engineers can do better than this, particularly with guidance. And this is part of the whole generating a culture of doc. You give them the guidance, they're more likely to help you write the docs. So, first of all, writers are outnumbered. Even at Salesforce, and Salesforce is a company that strongly believes in documentation. We are a strongly supported team. Documentation writers are hired in a strict ratio to developers and engineers. So that way so there are still way more of them than there are of us, but at least there are some of us, and we do get hired. But again, the problem is engineers are always going to outnumber writers, particularly in any kind of software engineering thing. So this is one of the reasons why you need to get engineers involved in your doc, why you have to generate this culture of doc. Where does your knowledge live? Lives in the heads of your SMEs, subject matter experts, for those people that aren't familiar with SME. So your subject matter expert, all of your information about internal processes and everything like that, it all lives inside the heads of your engineers. And somehow or another, you've got to get it out. You've got to get it out of their heads. Now, one of the things that we discovered at Salesforce, after a number of years of there not being anybody dedicated to internal documentation or to internal processes, was we ran into this situation. When the knowledge doesn't live in somebody's head, somebody, quite frankly, may have written it down, but where? We discovered there were between 6 to 8 different places for a technical spec to live. Nobody could ever find anything. There's no federated search. You can't go across all of the search sites or anything like that. And so even when information didn't live inside people's heads, it was completely unorganized, and there was no best practices for creating better content. Now we have entire presentations on preventing doc rot. For those things that are one-offs and then never get updated and nobody ever maintains them. And so how do you prevent that kind of thing? So what Salesforce did in order to solve this very complex issue of generating a culture of doc and documenting all of these internal processes and everything like that was they've actually formed an entire team for writing internal documentation. Yes, it is true, it is possible. Maybe your company won't do this, but we were able to do this and have an entire documentation team. So it is us mighty internal writer warriors. Yes, that is our actual symbol that we use. Sometimes it's the ninja, sometimes it's the ninja mole, but that's a whole other story. See me at the bar. So we have a team, 7 now, 10, something like that, of writers that are primarily focused just on internal documentation. So we have an internal architecture guide. Because the Salesforce code base is unfortunately monolithic, we're in the process of breaking it up, but it's this great big huge thing. We have just one book, the internal architecture guide, that just describes what the internal architecture is. How do all these silly classes and modules and everything like that relate to one another? We have another 3 writers that are responsible for internal processes. How do you build out a data center? How do you create servers? How do you upgrade all of these sorts of things? How do you have a release from end to end, which is a very complicated process with our servers. And so we're in the process of getting all of that documented so that way it can live there in infamy. Architecture white papers. The architecture white papers have both internal as well as external customers. But these white papers are really high level, very, very technical, even for somebody like me. But they're highly consumed. These are white papers that people are waiting on and ask for on a weekly basis at least. And then we have internal knowledge sharing. The stuff that is all about this particular little part of our code. How does it work? And that's me. That's my part of our internal writer warrior team. But wait, you're going to say, my company will never create an internal documentation team. My company does not prioritize doc, which happens. Believe me, it happens. My team doesn't have the headcount. They will never, ever, 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 ever do this. See, not made of gold. So what I'm going to give you are some ideas for how to start generating this culture of doc by focusing on internal processes and things that your engineers are actually going to use. My first suggestion, now, let me give you a little bit of background. My position came about because I wrote the job description, and I said this needed to happen. And so my great-grand boss, My great-grandpa said, sure, I'll find the money, if you can get this all arranged. So I went. It was a lot of pushing. It was a little bit of politics, but I was able to create the position of my dreams. I wrote the job description. I am not part of that percentage that does not like their job. I actually have probably one of the best jobs in the world. I'm sorry, but I do. So one of the ways to start your process, to start generating this culture of doc, is to harness the power of your internal champions. Find the people who are like-minded. For example, one of my engineers goes, his subtitle that he gives himself is Chief Verboser. This is somebody who cares about communication, who cares about doc. He is one of my biggest champions in terms of that. So you need to find the people who are like-minded. Find the people who care about doc. You will have some. There will be some engineers in your company who actually care about doc. You have to find those people and give them a forum. If it's a newsletter, somebody was talking about having a grammar sword and being able to email something off to other people who cared about grammar. So you need to find those kinds of people. And give them a forum. Now in Salesforce, we have this thing called Chatter. Chatter is like Facebook for the enterprise. I know, it's another social networking thing. Did not want to use Chatter when it first started. It's like, just shoot me now, right? Chatter has turned out to be one of the best tools in the world for a technical writer at Salesforce. Anytime that I post any kind of documentation, it goes in front of the right people now. It goes in front of people who care. It goes in front of people who will comment. It's been game-changing. It's been really great. You might not have something like Chatter, but you might have a YIM, some sort of instant messaging, and you could get some kind of group that way. You could do a brown bag. You could have a cheese and wine, festival, WHINE, where people can come and complain about how things don't work internally. So there are lots of ways that you can find these internal champions and then start getting them together. And remember, you are not, when it comes to generating this culture of doc, you don't have to go it alone. You are not the only person. You are not a single soul crying in the wilderness. You have internal champions. Go find them. Give them a forum to start complaining, and then start organizing. But first, you do have to find them. And again, brown bags, maybe an after-work happy hour where people can come. You'll find them. And what I have found, and the other thing is that your SMEs may actually have already ideas for how to fix stuff. And what I have found is that, because again, not doing this alone, I don't have to actually do any of the work. I do project management. I take this great big huge problem and I break it into small chunks and I say, you go do that, and you go do that, and you go do that, and then I'll do this at the end and bring it all together. That's really all that they've been asking for. Some kind of project management for documenting our internal projects, and that's how all of this started. And that's how I got my position, was just by this sort of thing. So when talking to my engineers, this has been the breakdown, that about a third of them are like my chief verboser. They are eager to help. They want better documentation. They want these internal processes documented. They care greatly about doc. They also tend to be long-winded, but that's a different, issue. About a third of them are absolutely willing to do what you tell them, but they need a lot of hand-holding. These, in my experience, have tended to be some of the younger engineers and like that. And you just need to give them really good guidelines, step-by-step processes of, this README file. You need to create a README file for every module. You're not ever going to get anybody to do that. Create a template that says, you must tell me these 3 things about this module. People will fill that in. So you just need to do a lot more hand-holding. We also do a lot of brown bags and training, writing tips for engineers. the Google and you, basically how to stock doc rot, how to write technical specs. We give them all of this sort of training, so that way that makes them much more comfortable and much more likely to do that. And then we have the last third, which are the curmudgeons. And we'll talk more about the curmudgeons later, but these are the people who they don't care about doc, they don't want to do doc, they don't want anything like that. These are your last audience that you have to convince, but eventually you might actually be able to convince them as well. And I've got some slides at the end. I have not posted these slides yet, but I will, and feel free to steal the last 3. So we'll get there. So things that we have found successful in order to get engineers to care about internal documentation and internal processes and do the right thing and document their stuff is we hold hack days. We hold a documentation hack day. You're all familiar with code hack days? Engineers just get to sit and spend a day doing their own kind of work. We have a doc hack day, the internal doc hack day. The next one is coming up 2 weeks. We always have a theme. We always have a talk at the start. We always have people to help, and we have very, very clear guidelines on whatever that particular code team is, what they can do in terms of internal doc. Whether it is, write that spec you always wanted to do, create your architectural diagram. And by the way, here's an example of an architectural diagram that you can use. We use Chatter, as I said, for intercommunication. Every team has their own Chatter group. Make sure that all the information on your Chatter group is up to date, that you have all the team members listed. Here's an example of all the things that should be on your Chatter team group. We also use Google Sites internally for all of the teams, so that way every team has their own internal Google site. What is on your front page of your Google site? Let's make sure that that's clear. Let me help you organize or redo or maybe put some, maybe archive a whole bunch of, the 14,000 pages that's part of your Google site right now, so nobody can ever find anything. So we have these. These have been greatly successful with wild projects that have ended up as part of that. Like, for example, one of the developers wanted to find out more about graphical tools in order to create ERDs or architectural diagrams or things like that. She started a list. It's grown, and now it's all been ranked, and the company has actually now gone out and bought additional software, so that way people now have graphical tools. And it all started from somebody doing a doc hack day. And yes, these are the kinds of things that we put up around on the floors where the engineers are sitting, so that way it's fun, right? That's a big, huge part of it. We try to make this fun. We try to make every communication that I send out to engineering is amusing. But that might just be me. Another thing that we do is the internal architecture review. We call it the STARS event, Salesforce Technical Architecture Review Sessions. These have been wildly popular. I don't know if you can tell. It's a little bit spread out. Even though people have their desktops open, nobody's looking at them. They're all listening to the panelists because we had such great panelists. So what we had, the first talk was the CTOs. We got all the CTOs in a room and had them talk. It was a moderated chat. It was fabulous. So you can't tell, but we've got about 45 people in the room, and we had another 45 on the phone listening to these talks. And again, it's just talking about what is our internal architecture, what are our internal processes. The second talk, which this is a picture of, was how do you do a release? And we had a cross-team functional talk. If anyone is in a big company, you know how fascinating that is to listen to all of these people from all of these different departments talk about a single process. So we had people from release engineering, from testing, from provisioning, from marketing, from documentation, from code, from quality engineering, all of them talking about the one process, getting stuff out the door to customers. It was great. And then another thing about the STARS event is that we make it very graphical. And so there are huge posters, you can't really see, but we put up huge posters of the architecture, because not everybody wants to listen to things or read things, they want to see pictures of things. So this is another way of generating this culture of doc, is by having this kind of event where people get to talk about the internal stuff, and it gets them curious, and then they start looking for the doc for it, and when they don't find it, they start to write it. Trust me. So again, share the knowledge that you have as a writer. As a writer, you are invaluable to these people, because as somebody else was saying, engineers might want to write, but they're not sure what they should write and things like that. Hold doc office hours. Tell people, hey, every Friday, come buy me a beer. No. I will be available at this time. You don't even have to buy me a beer. And I will talk with you about doc. I will look at your stuff. I will help you organize. I will do brainstorming with you. But you have really great knowledge as a writer that you can use to help your engineers write their processes and things like that. And again, all the trainings that I've mentioned. We give all these trainings. I give a training once a month now and record it, so that way engineers who are just now starting to onboard can get an idea of how it is they're supposed to do stuff. This is the number one thing to go back, is that some text is greater than no text. If there is nothing written down, nobody can find it. Nobody can do anything about it. One of the other things that we were talking about earlier was R&D productivity. If something is written down, that means that somebody who is onboarding doesn't have to go and bug your primary engineer. It means one less meeting for your primary engineer. So she might be able to actually get some coding done, as opposed to onboarding this person or helping them learn what the code base is about or anything like that. So one of the things that we're very focused on in generating this culture of doc is some text is better than no text. We can help you fix it later, but you've got to get it down. You've got to get it out of their heads and onto paper or wherever is appropriate. But good code documents itself. This is one of the things that the curmudgeons will say to you. Yeah, no, it doesn't. All good code, if it's good code, this is the first supplement, is it actually good code, or do you just think that it's good code? Because it might not actually be good code. If it is, because they think that they've named something that's obvious, it's FFPRB. Everyone knows what FFPRB is, right? No. So is the code actually good? Probably not. Even if it is good, all the good code tells me is what it does. It doesn't tell me what it is supposed to do, which are two very different things. It doesn't tell me the intent. And so when things break or something like that, I can't figure out what's wrong. I can't figure out why this thing is breaking because I don't know the intent of this code. So tell me what this thing is, how to use it, and who to contact. Not personal names. I don't need your personal email address. I want your team name. So these are the next slides that you feel free to steal. I will post this. I don't know where yet. Is there a place to post these? Okay, yes, there will be a place to post these afterwards, and this will be posted. And you can steal these last slides for proving to your own management why it is that you need documentation, you need internal documentation, and your engineers must write about their internal processes. So let's talk about the future. This is your mind after you have written some code. It is serene, it is orderly, it is able to levitate stuff, right? This is your mind 6 months later. Good luck finding something. I know, FFPRB, I know that's something. I could go look it up. What is that? And this is what it looks like to somebody new, 2 years later, if you're lucky. Again, what somebody else had said about how if you're not doing this kind of documentation, if your management does not value documentation, does not value this sort of thing, they are not looking to the future. Because 2 years, what did I write 2 years ago? I don't remember. Nobody's going to remember. And your engineers are not going to remember. And your engineers might not be there anymore. So they have to write stuff down. They have to they have to start valuing doc, and so these are some of the ways to help that. And so, questions, and I figured I'd throw this up as well. So that is my work content and my personal contact information. So, questions?
Anybody have questions?
So once you've written the internal doc and gotten it up to date, how are you storing it and how are you marking it as current?
It really depends. One of the things that we deal with frequently, because engineers, it's like, oh, cool, we could use the shiny new tool. No. What is the use case? So we want to make sure that wherever the doc is, it is as close to the customer as possible, whether that be code comments or in Eclipse or something like that. One of the things that we're currently doing is branding. You saw the little internal doc ninjas? So we brand the docs that have been said, yes, yea, verily, we have blessed you, things like that. But another part of it is the whole taxonomy of what is a current doc versus what is a snapshot. If something is a snapshot doc, you cannot expect it to stay current, and you don't have to go back and fix it. If something is considered a living doc, then that is something that must be updated and must be kept up to date. And so we're defining very clearly through naming standards, through headings, everything like that, what is considered a snapshot, and so nobody's ever going to update it, and you can't expect people to update it, versus a living doc. So that's one of the other things that we're doing. Does that answer your question? I beg your pardon?
When you say naming convention, do you mean titles, filings?
Titles, filings, but primarily, but because engineers are not going to follow those, put a timestamp at the top of the doc, yeah.
Hi. I was wondering how you enforce not just style guidelines, but sort of content management style guidelines. Do you have somebody who goes through and curates the content after they write it in a doc sprint? What
we do is the fix the doc. That is one of the things that we do. I actually create for certain types of bugs, for certain types of documentation, For certain types of documentation, for example, the README files, I create a bug, it's automatically generated, so I don't actually have to do any work. I create a bug for that team that says, you have a README file, is it up to date? Go and look at it. As part of the trust work, because our number one priority at Salesforce is our customer trust, part of trust work is documentation and internal documentation. And then fix the doc. Fix the doc is the opportunity for all engineers to go back through their existing documentation and make sure that they're still current and up to date. And so we don't have one person, we have a culture of going back and curating the docs. This is the key problem that we currently are still addressing. It is a problem that has not been solved yet, but we are in the process of getting there. Part of it is the education of what lives where. Don't create your tech spec in Word and attach it to the bug. Nobody is ever going to find that again. Create your tech spec in Google Docs. And so a huge part of that is education. And I've only had this position since August, and we are still affecting that change. So come and talk to me in a year, and I'll let you know everything that we've been able to successfully do. We've had some success. But yeah, we're very much in flux for that.
What level of do you have any levels of transparency where you share your internal docs with your end users or developers using your APIs? Or?
Internal docs are really just internal processes and things like that. All the APIs are external facing, and so that's external doc. But the internal doc, we've got conferences like this where I can talk with you about some of our internal processes, but no, that's all internal stuff and needs to stay internal because it's all proprietary and I'll get sued and like that.
Does your team also own like onboarding docs for developers and getting their workstation set up, scripts? Like, do you find that you also need to kind of, I don't know, like bait people into writing some other docs that they're not so thrilled to write by giving them some docs that just make their lives easier earlier on?
That is that's part of the culture that we're in the process of changing. A lot of the onboarding stuff is in our internal Google sites, so it's kind of like a wiki, which has the exact same joys and frustrations of every wiki. And so one of the changes that's recently come on with everyone that onboards, the very first page, great big huge bold red type says, if something is wrong, fix it. Seriously. And that's a huge cultural change for these engineers. If something is wrong, fix the doc. And so we're very much in the process of getting that change and making that happen to get them to do that kind of stuff. Fortunately, we do have management support, and so some of the areas of the process that have not been fabulously documented, they are now being told that they must document. So, and we provide office hours, we provide help, we provide brainstorming, everything like that for those areas. And so, yeah, they're getting done. I'm also very involved with the onboarding for engineers. And so what we've had hasn't necessarily been working as greatly as it should, and so we're in the process of creating a whole new system, but that's a different talk.
Cool. And last question.
Do you have any advice for small companies that don't necessarily have the resources to hire you and a team and all this stuff? Because one of the reasons I'm here is, no one documents, and it's, well, it's on Google Docs. No, wait, it's on Sites. No, it's on Basecamp. No, it's over here. It was written 2 years ago, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any advice for small companies that the management doesn't necessarily seem to be emphasizing? The
management might not be emphasizing, but I'm sure you have at least one engineer who is being frustrated by all of this. Exactly. Find a second engineer who is just as frustrated. Sit down, have a monthly meeting where it's just the pair of you, and you fix one of the doc problems. And then you fix the next doc problem. And then you fix the next doc problem. And suddenly you're going to have an engineer who's like, I need to the doc's right there. Huh, that's interesting. And then they'll start getting more and more involved. You have to document the things that your engineers are going to use on a regular basis. Once you start fixing some of that internal stuff, they're going to start caring more about the external stuff. And that was the last question, correct? Okay, thank you very much.